Hello, I am Laurie Duncan, and this is a Root Group podcast. Tune in. So, today's topic is a bond and floating charge. And many of you might be sitting there thinking, what the flippers is a bond and floating charge, LD? Never heard of it in my puff. Why has this not come up yet on my property journey? And depending on what stage you're at, yes, it's maybe not come up yet. But a bond and floating charge is a type of security, right? If people talk about charges, legal charges, then they are talking about securities. And a security is just something that exists to basically protect your lender's interest. So basic example, house is worth 100 grand, you take out a 75% mortgage, the bank therefore gives you £75,000, right? Now normally you would have a first charge security, or the bank would have a first charge security, or if you're giving securities to your investors, then you might have first charge securities, second charge securities. There's different types of securities you can give, like personal guarantees, and as you get more involved in commercial lending solutions, you will start to get involved with the likes of personal guarantees, bond and floating charges, deeds of subordination, and various other legal security type terminologies and documents. So the bond and floating charge is basically a charge that the lender has over the company, right? So it's the company assets. That can be stock, can be cash, can be equipment, all the stuff that you have on your balance sheet, they have security over. So they don't just have security over the asset, the property, because they'll usually also have a first charge security, and they might have a first charge security, a personal guarantee, and a bond and floating charge, depending on who your lender is. And what you'll tend to find is that depending on your LTV, if it's a higher LTV in a concentrated area, a bit more of a risky type lend for the lender, then they'll want more securities. But again, with commercial lending, you'll start building relationships with these people, and you can find that it becomes a bit more of a, not necessarily a negotiation, but if you've only got a 50% LTV, you've got a diverse portfolio with no single asset value drop on the valuation, it's not a risky lend from the bank's point of view, right? They're lending that all day long. You'll get a better interest rate as well, and then there's a real kind of lack of securities. They'll still take a first charge usually, and maybe a PG to the value of that debt, whatever it might be, or a percentage of that debt, maybe 25%. Again, these specifics do vary by lender, but the bond and floating charge, which this podcast is about, is just an extra level of security for the bank. That's all it means. And it just means that if you owe them this £75,000 in this example, property's worth 100 grand, bank's got 75 grand, so you've got a 75% LTV. If you default on that loan, and you only owe them, you owe them 75, but the bank has to sell it off for 70 grand because it wouldn't sell on the open market at 75 or whatever. You still owe them 5 grand, right? So they would then be legally entitled to any cash that you had in the bank, for example. And you might not have any cash in the bank. So if you've not got any cash in the bank and you still owe the bank 5 grand, plus all the fees that goes along with it, by the way, so it's maybe not just the 5 grand, could be 15 grand by the time you cover all the bank's fees, their legal expenses and all the rest of it. They could legally claim from your cash, or they could legally claim from your personal estate if you have a personal guarantee. So, the bond and floating charge isn't really something that's talked about a lot, because most folk focus on training. When people are doing training and stuff, it's all focused around this kind of phase one, this like basic understanding of property investment, where you just buy stuff on mortgages and that's it. So if you're dealing with phase 1 lenders, they're only going to have a first charge normally. It's only really when you start scaling into phase 2, dealing with commercial lending, you need to consider the likes of the bond and floating charges. So very important to be aware of that. If you've not got to that stage yet, you should set out to move yourself into that stage, this higher level, this phase 2 that so many people don't even know or believe that exists. I can only tell you myself, from going from 0 to over 200 properties in only 2.5 years, there is definitely another level. I would not have believed 3 years ago that was a possible thing to do. But it's pretty cool now being here, and I've achieved it, and we're only continuing to do more, as I assume you already know, because you are listening to the Rood Group podcasts. But anyway, bond and floating charge, that should probably be very beneficial to many of you. Drop us a comment, right? Let us know what you think. If you think this content's awesome, tell us. If you think it's pish, tell us. But keen to hear feedback from you about the content that we're putting out. Subscribe if you have not subscribed. If you've not subscribed, that is insanity, baby. We're putting these out on YouTube, Spotify, podcasts, like all these different things, like the Apple podcast thing. So they are everywhere. You should subscribe. You should tune in and listen to what else we have got to say, because we have got a lot more coming your way. Anyway, thank you. Really appreciate you tuning in. Really appreciate your time. And I cannot wait to catch up with you again soon. Cheers.